I will now discuss the history of the camera. To gain a better understanding of all that goes into remote sensing and aerial photography, I will first discuss the history of the camera and how the technology has advanced over time. Before the invention of the photographic camera we know today, there was the camera obscura. The camera obscura, Latin for darkroom, allowed for an inverted or upside-down image to be projected onto a screen or wall as the result of light being projected from a small hole. The earliest record of this phenomena was made by Chinese philosopher Mozi, who lived from 470 to 391 BC and discovered that light traveled in a straight line from its source. Later, in the 11th century, a highly regarded Arab physicist, and I will pre-apologize for all the name butchering I will be doing today. So the Arab physicist was named Ibn al-Haytham, who studied geometry and optics, and also wrote about his experiments of light being projected through a small hole in a dark room, and was accredited as the inventor of the pinhole camera. However, those images that the light projected were not permanent, so people used these projected images as outlines to help them draw better. Inserting a lens into the hole helped people draw more accurately and with more detail, being traced back to the 1550s, pun intended. He inspired many artists, including Leonardo da Vinci, and created a practice that remained popular for a couple hundred years. In 1727, the German scientist Johann Heinrich Schultz discovered that silver salts darken when exposed to light alone, and they are not influenced by heat or air. 50 years later, Swedish chemist Carl Wilhelm Scheele discovered that silver chloride was especially susceptible to darkening from light exposure, and that once it darkened, it became insoluble to ammonia solutions. In Paris, nearly 50 more years later, Joseph Niepce made the first permanent photograph using a sliding wooden box camera, which was made by Charles and Vincent Chevalier. He did this through a process he coined as heliography, which used an exposure time of 8 hours to create an image on asphalt-coated pewter. Niepce worked with inventor Louis-Jacques Montaigu to improve this new process. Niepce tried to improve it by working with other chemicals, while Daguerre worked on improving the camera's design. They worked together until Niepce's death in 1833. Daguerre had gone on to successfully develop sharper images by exposing silver iodide-coated plates to mercury vapor. Four short years later, Daguerre was able to make the image permanent or fixed on a single plate. He used a common salt solution, which had the added benefit of being much safer to use. He coined it the daguerreotype, and it became extremely popular on an international scale after the French government made the process free to the public. Daguerre had unsuccessfully tried to commercialize it, so the French government purchased the rights in exchange for pensions for both Daguerre and Niepce's son, Isidore. In the 1830s, the English scientist William Henry Fox Talbot had also discovered the process to fix camera images using silver salts. Unfortunately for him, Daguerre beat him to the punch in announcing his invention to the world, and it never became nearly as popular. However, his process, the calotype, was the first two-step process that printed photographs onto paper. It was also the first to use negative prints. This allowed for duplicates to be made, unlike Daguerre's, which required a second photo of the original photo to be taken and then processed. Talbot's process also allowed for printers to change the image by retouching it, forming the basis of photography today. The first commercial photographic camera was created by Alphonse Giraud in 1839. He worked with Daguerre and Isidore Niepce to produce the cameras, where each camera and its accessories totaled about $5,000 US, if my inflation sources are accurate. Early model exposure times ranged from 5 to 30 minutes. Shortly thereafter, many people created new and improved versions of this camera and its parts, including Charles Chevalier, who had provided the original lens to Niepce years earlier, and he had made a camera that was easier to move around, reduced exposure time to 30 minutes, and created a laterally correct image, as well as Francis Marc Antoine Godin, who created a camera with variable aperture, meaning that it was capable of changing the amount of light that passes through the lens or the amount of exposure. Germany's Peter Wilhelm Friedrich Richter von Voigtlander, who created an all-metal camera that made 3-inch circular pictures with the help of Hungary's Joseph Petzl, who created a lens that was 30 times faster than any other lens for almost 60 years. That was until Germany's Carl Zeiss, who was known primarily for his work with improving microscopes. In 1851, Scott Archer of England developed the collodion process, also known as the collodion wet plate process. It required glass plates to be coated with silver compounds, sensitized, exposed, and developed within 15 minutes, which was about 1/10 of the time of daguerreotypes. Because of this short time period, it required a photograph to it required a dark room if photos were not taken in the studio. In 1857, dry plates created by Desiree von Montcalvan allowed for photos to be processed later, eliminating the need for a darkroom, but it took more time. In 1871, Richard Leake Maddock created the dry gelatin plate, which was fast like wet plates and allowed for snapshots due to its increased sensitivity. It eliminated the need for tripods and allowed for handheld cameras. George Eastman, the founder of Kodak, was the first to use camera film. He started manufacturing paper film in 1885 and began selling Kodak's first low-priced and easily accessible camera in 1888, and then moved on to celluloid film in 1889. Each camera came with 100 exposures, and the film needed to be returned to the company to be developed. Kodak was also one of the first companies to use digital photography, but they decided against moving forward with the production process because the film version was making so much money. Bad move, Kodak. The use of film made movies possible by allowing them to show the motion between the film images at the end of the 19th century.